Well, my experience was a little bit different from
Mm-hmm.
Pat's. After I finished high school, I went to college for a year at Clark Atlanta. I was a French major, and then I decided I wanted to work um, as well as go to school. So I became a long distance operator for
Mm-hmm.
Southern Bell, and I did teletyping there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And after doing that for a while, I got a little restless, and I, wanted some new adventures. Being young, I wanted to explore,
Mm-hmm.
some other things. So I was babysitting for a neighbor who was one of the first ticket agents, black female ticket agents for
Mm-hmm.
Delta. And so her name was Emily McCrary. And I
Mm-hmm.
asked Emily, how did you get that job? How did you go about doing that? And she said, I got an interview with this gentleman and who worked for the Defense Department at that time. His name was Horace Bohannon. And I said, do you think he could get an interview for me? And
Mm-hmm.
she said, sure. So she arranged that. And then he, in turn, arranged an interview at Delta for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went, I was seeking um, employment in reservations
Mm-hmm.
because I had the experience from being a long distance operator with wearing the earphones
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with customer service over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so during my interview, the gentleman asked me, he said, well, why do you want to go into reservations? I thought you were bored with that. And, even though you'd be coming with a different company, you'd be basically doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, have you ever thought about doing something else with the airline? I said, well, no, not really. I didn't know what else was available. So he said, what about being a stewardess? And I was like, a stewardess?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't know. I said, what do they do? And he said, it's like an airline hostess. You'd be working on the airplane,
Mm-hmm.
serving people, taking care of their needs, learning emergency procedures in case, anything happened, you'd be able to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got excited for a moment, but then I thought about it. I've never been on an airplane before. I've never even flown. I've always said, I've heard other people say, well, I'm afraid to fly. So I said, well, I'm afraid to fly too. If you're afraid, I'm afraid, Because when you're young, you think
Mm-hmm.
like that. So anyway, he said, well, just think it over. Go home and talk to your parents about it and see
Uh-huh.
what they think.
Uh-huh.
And so that's what I did. And oh, they were just beside themselves. What? You're going to be an airline hostess? They want you to fly for the airline? And
Mm-hmm.
at that time, it didn't occur to me. I wasn't thinking. Three of my mom's sisters had worked for Delta when I was a little girl
Okay.
in cabin service and, serving in that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I called the gentleman back and told him that my parents had approved and were excited about me doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, sure, I'd love to. And so I was accepted and went into training. Um, and we had to maintain a 90 average.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it was like 5 or 6 weeks training. And I was the only black, as Pat was,
Mm-hmm.
in her training class. Out of 50 flight attendants, I was the only black in my class. And yeah, it somewhat intimidating, but not altogether because
Mm-hmm.
I had also gone to, after I left Clark Atlanta, I went to Georgia State
Mm-hmm.
University as well, and there were, other students there. It was more diversified.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was accustomed now to being with other cultures and other people of color.
Mm-hmm.
So of different races. And so it was the most wonderful experience, the training and
Mm-hmm.
meeting all the new people from all the other cities. And I enjoyed it.
That's good. I
I
mean,
enjoyed
so
it very much.
overall, considering that you were the first black women who were by yourselves during the training,
Yeah.
would you say that that was a overall a positive experience, or what was the initial reaction when all the other stewardesses who were going through training, who were white, saw you walk through the door?
Pat, you want to go first?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Since you were first, I'll let you go first.
Well, I think the women I think they were at all, I can say that at all, that to see a colored person that was a colored girl
Mhm.
At that time.
at that time
Mhm.
come in and sit with them and um, learned what they learned,
Mhm.
learned that the training that I have gotten, the same training, talked with them, spoke with them, they spoke with me, the interaction.
Mhm.
Um, at first, they were a little standoffish,
Mhm.
um, but as time went on, the training was 4 weeks, I believe.
Mhm.
They gotten used to me and
Mhm.
got a little closer.
Mhm.
The camaraderie had gotten a little better.
Mhm.
The trainers, they were wonderful to me in every
Mhm.
way. They encouraged me in every way.
Mhm.
Um, um, and that was it, I believe. And I felt at first um, a little intimidated,
Mhm.
but then I got used to it.
Mhm.
And because I knew I wanted to go through with this, and I knew I couldn't back out, I did not want to back out because I'm sure they could have gotten someone else in my place, so I
Mhm.
couldn't back out. If I felt a little fear, fear inside, but I was pretty determined
Okay.
and determined to be who I know, who I am inside, and especially wanted to fly to different cities and states and just go on with the career and
Mhm.
not be taken back by fear.
Mhm.
The word fear really was kind of a big factor in my life,
Mhm.
and I had to overcome that.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to say this to the black women and the black men and the young kids and the young men and women that word fear is not it's very negative
Mhm.
uh, to me, and I'm sure it'll
Mhm.
be to them, and because it really makes you just just freeze a little bit.
Mhm.
And again, you could overcome it
Mhm.
by prayer, power of prayer, and say yes, I know I can do it,
Mhm.
and I know I'm a little different from these folks, but
Mhm.
I know in my heart I know I can do it, and
Mhm.
they knew that I could do it, but I had to make the initiation. I had to make to go forward,
Mhm.
to step forward and do it. And the positives, a lot of positives came out of that. A
Mhm.
lot of doors were open, and so that's where I was at that time. And then
Um, my experience was very similar to Pat's.
Mhm.
For the most part, most of the young ladies were friendly.
Mhm.
They were cordial and they were polite.
Mhm.
There were a few that were very quiet. But you know what I had to learn was sometimes not to always take it personally.
Mhm.
Sometimes they may have had things going on in their lives. They may have been shy and just really didn't know how to open up or to approach you.
Mhm.
So I just tried to always keep a positive attitude and remember what I was there to do and just focus on that.
Mhm.
And the instructors were always very sweet.
Mhm.
And one of the things I remember very vividly is them telling me about Pat, with her
Oh.
being first. And they
Uh-huh.
said, "Oh, you're just going to love Pat." And I think they thought that would be some level of comfort for
Mhm.
me to encourage me by saying, you're not totally alone. There's,
Mhm.
another African American flight attendant hired before you.
Mhm.
And she's great. She's wonderful. She's having fun. And so that really meant a lot too. Now my roommate, I really really liked. She was very wonderful. Her name was June Zern, and at that time the little training center. It was like we stayed at a place called the Air Hostel on Virginia Avenue, and we had a house mother named Mrs. A, and she was wonderful as well. And then we'd walk down the street in the mornings and go to our training class.
Mhm.
And there used to be a place called Morrison's Cafeteria. I don't know if you remember that.
no,
Over where the Delta Credit Union is now.
Okay.
And we'd go there and eat almost every day. And it was just like a little Southern charm kind of
Mhm.
restaurant, and somewhat similar to the Piccadilly restaurant. And
Yes.
we'd
Mhm.
have wonderful meals there. So my experience in training was great. Like I said, it was a little bit of pressure knowing that you had to maintain that 90 average.
Mhm.
But I had graduated, like upper 10% of my class in high school, and I had
Mhm.
done well in the year of college that I went at Clark and everything. So I was pretty confident I'd be able to pass the course, and I did.
Fantastic.
One of the ways that they determined where your base was going to be was they'd bring a hat that had numbers in it, all folded up, and everyone would pull a number, and that way it would determine which bases were open and where you go. People with the lower numbers got their first and better choices. People who got the higher numbers, who pulled toward the end, kind of got what was left. Lo and behold, out of 50 numbers, and they let me pull first because I was the only black in the class. I pulled the last number.
You pulled 50?
I pulled number 50.
Vanola.
And I said, I often look back and wonder, what are all 50s in there?
Did you ladies ever feel, was this pressure sort of internal, like, I'm not just representing myself and my family, but I'm representing all black women. Like, if I can't mess this up because there's going to be somebody else. So I have to make sure that I am the best of the best entering into this kind of environment.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. You phrased it very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did feel that. And because Pat had come before me and she had done well, I'm like, okay, now Pat has done her part. Now I have to do mine. And, they felt enough confidence and they saw enough in me to hire me. And my family, I don't want to let them down because my parents had, approved me to do this. And of course, everyone's waiting to see what the result is going to be with you entering into this career. And so I didn't want to disappoint anybody. And thank God I didn't.
It worked out okay.
It worked out.
You were the first. I mean, you were breaking new ground at Delta. And so did you feel like there was a heightened level of maybe not necessarily scrutiny, but just eyes on you that not at the same level as your counterparts who are white?
I thought you would say that. I felt I was being watched every move that I made, but it was good for me to know that because it was like a sense of security. And I felt that if anything was wrong, I could freely talk to the supervisors, and they could take the problem up to a higher area. But they didn't have to because the problem was solved in the office, the supervisor's office. So I felt very good about that, and confident.
So I read from other African American women who were flight attendants very early on during your era, who thought Delta did a great job of protecting you and offering a sense of community as you ladies were integrating. You feel the same way?
Yes.
Absolutely, I did. I told Casey Grant that wrote the book. There's an incident where I was in, I believe it was Mississippi, on a layover, and this was during civil rights. And initially flight attendants would have roommates. We'd stay together on layovers. You didn't have single rooms at that time. And they wanted to put me in a room like far away from the rest of the crew. And the captain could see my eyes getting big, and I was like, oh boy, I'm not going to be comfortable with that. And so he stood up for me. He went back to the desk and he told them, he said, you will place her in a room right next to mine. And so that, she can be comfortable, she won't have any fear, and so that I can be confident that she's okay. So in that sense, there were a lot of people who understood what was going on, and they had empathy and sympathy, and they wanted to let you know that they were there to support you.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
very
Nice.
caring, and other flight attendants showed some of that as well.